doing something slightly different today for this episode. And that is that we wanted to get some of the CEOs and founders of some of our portfolio companies to give an update on how the COVID-19 crisis has been affected their businesses, the different things that they're seeing, the effect it's had on their customers, and so that we can just get a sense. So myself and Adam Vaziri last week gave an overview of all the different areas in crypto and how we think they're going to be affected by a recessive environment and also the health crisis. So we went through crypto mining, crypto exchanges, crypto wallets, and all the different areas. If you haven't seen episode 52, then check out the YouTube channel and review that on last week's episode. And this week, we've actually got Famida, as usual, taking questions. So if you want to ask questions, then head over to our Telegram group, which is @BF_token. Or you can go to our Twitter channel, and if you do hashtag BF Live, then we'll be able to pick up any tweets. Or you can obviously just use the live chat on YouTube, which is what most people are using at the moment. So we've got Joshua from Voltoro, and we've got Sergey from BitRefill, who are both Bitcoin community members, as well as CEOs and founders of portfolio companies which have Bank to the Future investors. So let's take it from the top. And I guess the first question I've got is, and Sergey, you can jump in as well. Feel free to jump in if you've got anything to add. But Joshua, I wanted to ask you, because I think in the current market, I couldn't really think of any business that is more positioned in order to support people in times of financial uncertainty than a company that deals with Bitcoin and gold. So what are you seeing on your side? Are you seeing new customers? Are you seeing people exit the market because they want a movement to cash? Or what are you seeing on your side?
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting at the start. 3-4 weeks ago, when the markets really started reacting. We have to step back a bit for when we saw COVID spreading all around the world, and the prepper types and Bitcoiner types were already going like, oh, okay, because I think Bitcoiners understand exponential curves a little bit better. But what happened? There was definite manipulation in the stock market, because everything was going up and up and up, even though like things like airplane companies and flight companies were hitting all-time highs, and yet they were grounding fleets, and it just didn't make sense. And that's when we started seeing upticks at Voltoro, but also Bar9, which is our other sister company under the Voltoro group, which is for gold for euros, like an easy way to buy gold with euros and have it as an alternative saving solution. So you can, instead of saving your money in a bank that a lot of people don't trust, they save it in bullion, and then they can withdraw it into their bank like that. And that's where we started seeing upticks. Bitcoiners, I think it took them by surprise when that massive red candle hit and it went bang, and Bitcoin then followed. And a lot of people were like, what's going on? I thought Bitcoin was like the go-to place for in a crisis. And gold crashed, Bitcoin crashed, the stock market crashed, everything was crashing. And this was because people were scrambling for liquidity. They needed to cover long positions that they'd taken, or try to fix situations that they had bet wrong on. And in typically gold and Bitcoin, they don't really do well in the crisis moment. Where they do well is when you see governments starting to print the hell out of money and creating all this nonsense currency and devaluing the currency supply. And that's where really these limited amounts of money come in. So our business started seeing a lot of uptick. Bar9, which was the fiat gateway, saw a lot of attraction. And what was interesting there, though, after that is...
Was that people getting out of gold and into euros, getting out of euros into gold? What were you seeing?
Getting into gold. They saw gold drop, and they saw it as a buying opportunity, because while gold was dropping, it was harder and harder to find. The physical locations people were lining up around the block to get at the physical stores. They then ran out. At the meantime, gold prices are sinking globally on the paper gold market, yet it's impossible to find the stuff. You could go to, and dealers were charging sometimes 30 to 60% above spot for gold. So it was this ridiculous dichotomy where the paper markets were falling because anyone with access to a computer could just drop or fund managers could just sell the ETF like with a click of a button. But people actually on the street trying to find the physical were not being able to do so. So this is where Bar 9 really shone, because we deal in physical and we make it as easy to buy as an ETF. But the problem was we then found it harder and harder to find gold, which was tricky.
Yeah, so part of your service is that people can use, correct me if I'm wrong, euros or Bitcoin to get into gold. But then a part of your value add is that they can take physical delivery. So were you actually seeing a squeeze on trying to get physical delivery?
Well, the physical delivery became hard because the Brinks didn't offer it for a little while there, and they're still not offering it to homes, because it's very different from Amazon. Amazon can just reach you a parcel and be done with it. Gold and precious metals, you need signatures and the insurance and everything like that. So people are very wary of it. Saying that, people just want to get their hands away, to get their money out of the banking system, because as you're seeing, people starting to worry about places like establishments like HSBC, who are very focused in Asia. They have a massive exposure in Asia and the supply chains over there. And these supply chains are having a knock-on effect because demand is dropping in Europe for their products. And so people are worried about HSBC then defaulting and things like this. So they don't want their money in these banking structures. So they're just scrambling to look for something. And then when they go to the gold markets, the traditional ones, they're like, well, we don't have any. And that's where they come to us.
When people have their paper gold and then they actually try to get physical delivery and they realize there's a shortage and scarcity in physical delivery, do people start to ask the question then, is it easier to get a Ledger or Trezor wallet and actually convert some of that Bitcoin that gold into crypto, and realizing, or maybe they're seeing Bitcoin as too speculative if they were a gold investor? What types of trends are people starting to see the benefit of being able to take physical delivery as long as you have a hardware wallet versus the supply chain breaking down and trying to figure out how to get physical delivery delivered to your door, with the potential of having to come into contact with a human when you might be in solitude? And what are the types of things that people might be thinking differently now?
So the people that want physical delivery of gold that they can cuddle are very, very niche, because these are people that are preparing for everything hits the fan moments. We've got to protect everything with guns and like really hardcore prepper types.
They're preparing for the internet going down, so they don't really believe
Exactly. And we are our general customer base are like, I just want my money out of the banking system because I don't trust the banking system's not going to collapse with this ridiculous amount of money printing. So they don't want an ETF because that's the custodian of, like, say the GLD is owned by HSBC. So they're the custodian of the GLD. So they don't want to trust that, because if HSBC goes down, that GLD, that gold, is actually in the name of the company. So they could use that to have a bail-in with their own, with everybody's gold backing stuff. So they don't want, so a lot of clients, they actually want the gold allocated to them in their name, and that's why they would use us. And in terms of converting back to Bitcoin, there's a separation there too. So the older generations, they want gold. They don't want to go from something speculative like the stock exchange and jump into something more risky like Bitcoin that they perceive as more risky. Whereas younger people, they don't perceive it as more risky. They feel that they've got enough time to re-earn any losses if they have losses. but they feel like it's a good split. So a lot of them split half Bitcoin, half gold, and stuff like that. They sort of have a little portfolio of different rare assets. And this is where I have a real beef with people like Peter Schiff and Grayscale and stuff like that, where they can completely pit gold and Bitcoin against each other. And I'm constantly saying, look, guys, diversification within rare assets is a wonderful thing. We're in this together against these ridiculous paper markets that are now really coming crumbling to the ground as supply chains fall, as people are scared to go back to work, as people are even scared to go shopping.
Yeah, and my speculation is that really a situation like this, where you're trying to get physical delivery of gold, but you own paper gold, and there's exchanges like Vaultoro which operate a Bitcoin to gold market. Really, it highlights how the two can work complementary together. So, at least if you can't get physical delivery of gold, you've got the option, if you buy into the theory of unprintable money, that you can actually take physical delivery in the absence of the ability to take physical delivery when there's a global scarcity to gold. Let me just ask you one question before we move over to Sergey and Bitrefill. Let's say the banking system did collapse, and we do enter that scenario. Is it possible that Vaultoro can completely continue operations, obviously extremely disrupted? Everyone would be affected in an extremely negative way if fiat money collapsed and banking collapsed. That's not a desirable outcome. We don't want our Bitcoin to go up and everyone lose their money. That's not a desirable outcome. But does Vaultoro at this stage today have enough tools with stable coins, with Bitcoin, with gold, to continue that business functioning and offer services that the world will need to see in the future?
While it would be extremely hard, yes, I absolutely think it can, because our traders are trading between the bullion and the gold. It would be hard for us to put more gold into the market because all the supply chain of the smelters and the mines behind where we source gold from, they would then start to look for other technology. I think any banking crisis, if you look historically, they don't last too long. You would get an extreme crash, you would get a total destruction of value across the globe, but pretty quickly you would see governments coming with new currencies, new systems in place. But in that meantime, in that moment, I think you would see a huge shift over to cryptocurrencies, at least ones like that maybe like Bitcoin especially. I think you would stick. I think a lot of people, because the brand is so strong, that they would jump across to that. But I think within weeks you would have a new currency coming up, mandated by governments, and probably not global. There would probably be local currencies. Not when I say local, more sovereign, country-based currencies would respawn, because without that, you just have no supply chains at all for food and everything, and it starts to get really rough. But in terms of this, the value would be totally destroyed. But Vaultoro could definitely continue working, because why not? If someone has gold and they want to trade it for Bitcoin, and the Bitcoiner wants gold, then they just do a swap.
Yeah, my theory is in that scenario, the central bank would issue their own digital currency proportion to the value that people are losing at the banks, and everyone would become a bank would have a bank account with the Fed or the central bank in their country, and they'd open up their API keys and create a huge new opportunity for fintech companies to replace a lot of the services of banking. So I don't see the scenario where everyone loses their deposits. It's just a scramble for new technology based upon a new system. Let's slightly shift gears to Sergey. So all around the world, retailers are, really in a very problematic situation. Restaurants all around the globe are closed. Hotels all around the globe are closed. Everybody's in a global lockdown. And obviously, some of the biggest beneficiaries of that are companies like Amazon, who I've heard has employed like in 1 week, the first week, tried to employ 100,000 new people and then tried to create 25,000 new jobs. And they're just trying to serve the entire world. Now, obviously, with a Bit Refill, unless things have changed, so it's great to get the update, you've offered people an easy way to use their cryptocurrency to spend it in the real world through interesting markets like the Amazon gift card market and iTunes and all those things. So all the companies that were completely prepped for global distribution through people that could transact online. But obviously those are two different trends that we're seeing at the same time. A complete drop in one form of retail, but a ginormous redistribution to online retail. So Sergey, what are some of the things that you're seeing? What was your immediate reaction to this crisis?
Right. So there's several things to tie into the stuff that Joshua was saying. You have to keep in mind a little bit, like what is it that we see, like the traffic that we see and what we can learn from it. For us, we're a service where people basically exchange their Bitcoins into something else, right? So we're a sell side only exchange of sorts. We're not really an exchange, but we're something that achieves exchange of Bitcoin into goods and services. And so when and of our users, like broadly, we have the circular economy, people who get paid in Bitcoin and who use it to buy stuff to live, right? They're pretty steady volume, like people living their lives, they continue living their lives similar extent as before. But we also have a part of our volume, which is more the average Bitcoiner that you can imagine on Twitter, people who like, yeah, maybe I'll buy it with my Bitcoins, maybe I'll buy it with something else. They have a little bit of options and they're a little bit more price sensitive. So when the Bitcoin is high, they'll be, I'll be buying stuff, and when the Bitcoin is low, they'll be like, maybe, I'm going to hold my Bitcoins a little bit, see if they go up a little bit more, things like that. And so usually when there is, so when we see a spike in volume, that means that many people are selling their coins, right? And this can happen for different reasons. It could be because the price is going up, and so there's more volume, and many people are looking to sell their coins because, hey, I'm suddenly a little bit richer, so they're selling a little bit of coins. But there's also a moment in which there is fear and panic, and people are trying to dump their coins real fast, right? And in some cases, we see a big spike in volume when there's a big drop in the Bitcoin price. In this particular case, we did not see that. So when the big drop in the Bitcoin price happened, our volumes did something similar. Not similar, but directionally at least. Didn't decline as much, but it declined a little bit. And so I guess the conclusion that I would take from that is that the big sell-off that was happening is probably not your average Bitcoin or DeFi enthusiast or what have you. Right? It's not the people that we have on our Twitter account that were driving the sell-off. It's something else. Somebody who's not usually a customer of Bitrefill, like financial institutions, hedge funds, stuff like that, right? And so this is different compared to other situations when there's like a massive fear and everybody's nervous and they're trying to sell their coins. In those situations, we usually see a spike, temporarily at least. And so we didn't see that. Other than that, we see what you could expect. The travel segment of our gift card is not doing very great. On the other hand, the game segment is doing really great, right? And so it's very people are buying, not buying so much gift cards for restaurant, but they're buying for the takeout services. For the e-commerce like Amazon, it's constant. I think there's a slight drop off that, to be honest, I think it's like across the board. Like even the Amazons of the world, short term, have taken a slight hit. Because people are holding on to their money a little bit more generally. I'm not talking about crypto now, but in society, plus supply chain issues and delivery issues and stuff like that. So we're taking a small hit, but like not, we're volume wise, we're back to where we were in December. So
people, do your customers, like, this is a really interesting panel because we've got like these unconventional markets, Bitcoin to gold. And I guess we're seeing Bitcoin to gift cards as a kind of an exchange, really. Some people are seeing the value in using gift cards as a currency. So essentially, Amazon gift cards are a currency to some people. That's a really interesting thing that people, deciding to get around the banking system. So if we're imagining this world without banks, then you've got these Bitcoin to gift cards, where essentially the gift cards acts as a currency. And I'm sure all these companies would have their own currencies and all sorts of stuff. What about stable coins? Do you do anything with stable coins at BitRefill?
Yeah, we don't do so much stable coin stuff yet.
Okay.
But I think, I thought about your bank collapse question, and it's a big question because for us as well, like, hey, we can still sell the cards that we have, but how do we buy new cards? We need to pay for those, right? And so on. And so it's I think it's a little bit tricky. You need to specify what kind of bank collapse happens, where, and so on, and how do how will Amazon operate if in a world where there's no banks, and what does that mean? And I think you guys were right that
what the US
won't disappear entirely; it will change into something else.
Sure. What the US lawmakers might really be regretting that decision of not allowing Facebook to launch, because really under these conditions, they could have become bank to the entire world. And US, obviously, the government would have been the benefactor, because as we know from the Snowden revelations, obviously the government has a back door. So it seems like, bank lobbying has probably worked very counter to what would have been in the interest, I guess.
I don't know. I mean, they kind of benefit from being able to do quantitative easing and money printing in USD and so on. And so I don't know, from their perspective, if it was the wrong thing to do, I'm not sure. I mean, from our perspective, I think, I don't know, the way I see it is that the overarching trend of our time is that money-like system, in whatever form that they may be, are moving from the more locked in into the more liquid ones. And the anything from like air miles or what have you, or points, or from fiat currencies, everything, and everybody's trying to keep it locked up. It's the same with the US dollar and whatever. They're trying to keep it under control, but eventually people figure out ways of we can figure out ways of making it tradable, and then suddenly somebody attaches it to a token somewhere, or exchanges it for Bitcoin, and this and that, and suddenly everything becomes interconnected anyway. And so, from my perspective, I see any movement into from even something there was this JP Morgan coin that was discussed for a while back, right? And I thought about it, and it's it is good news for us, because it is a clear step. JP Morgan coin, by definition, has at least the freedom that a dollar on a JP Morgan bank account has, but it probably also has some other properties that gives it a little bit more freedom, right? Yeah. And as people get a taste, more and more taste of that freedom, it sort of leads them in the direction that where we're, at the very end here with the most liquid of them all, right?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is with these coins that like JP Morgan, they would be backed by dollars, and then what happens is these dollars, when you print currency, and I know our viewers here understand this, but a lot of people still don't understand it, that when you print stuff, especially on the left, because they're all about, you know, universal basic income and all these sorts of things where governments are printing money. And it's like, hang on, they're not printing money, they're printing currency. Currency doesn't mean value. Currency is a measurement of value. And when you just start putting more of the measurement of value in, the value doesn't change. You just dilute it. And of course, what will happen then is with these references to that diluted money, like JP Morgan coin, they would also just continue losing value. But on top of that, they might even add to the problem, because they would be in some sort of fractional reserve. Maybe they're not backing everything, so they're printing more fake money on top of more. Like, let's say, you know, they just make way more JP Morgan coin than it's backing it. Then on top of that, you also have that USD inflation. So I think at the end of the day, these fiat-backed coins are an absolute atrocious monster that can really do big damage, not only to the view of that people have of cryptocurrency, because they will call them cryptocurrencies, but it also will damage people in terms of their savings as well. I don't see it doing anything good for anyone.
Yeah, well, I think it's about understanding timeframes here. So for me, I hold dollars because of the fiat currencies. I think it's going to be the strongest until it's not the strongest. But those dollars in my mind are, the way that I think about those dollars is, right, those are dollars that are in my name, but they belong to somebody else. If they like the way that I'm going to be spending it, then I might be able to access them. But if I try and send it to a crypto exchange, and I know I'm going to have this ginormous amount of paperwork of tracing back blockchains and proving that I didn't get them from Silk Road and they're not the proceeds of crime. But they do deliver utility in that they give me short-term stability. It isn't where I'm going to put my savings. My savings are going to be in Bitcoin, because I believe that in terms of a risk-reward strategy, there's no higher gain relative to the risk in my mind of where I think the world's going. Now, I accept that the world is not, you know, so if you're speaking to somebody that's just about to retire, then, you know, their time frame of savings is different to somebody that's, you know, not going to be retiring for like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So you can think very differently, but the thing that fiat does very well is that they're very good, especially dollars, for preserving short-term value. But we all know that they're going to be, you know, if you're keeping all your savings in dollars, then you're just going to be working harder and harder and harder over your lifetime for that. Yeah. So your savings need to be speculated. And in terms of speculation, you've got the stock market, you've got the credit risk of the government, which your pension will do for you if you're contributing to that. And I think of that as something that it's a nice bonus if those, so when I was working in banking, I was contributing to my pension. I stopped doing it. I put it in a self-invested pension and then managed to get it into Bitcoin through some strange counterparty risk product. I'd love to take physical delivery, but I just don't think there is a way I could do that. So the way that I look at my pension is by the time I'm at an age where that will pay out, I'm fully expecting that not to be there anymore. If it's there, great, that's a bonus. But that's how I think about it. So we've got to think it's a mindset of doing that ourselves.
Hey, I actually have a comment from somebody who's well commented on these values, what currency, and just said basically the solution isn't about a currency, it's about easily moving value stores, currency fluidity. And that was from you, Jenna.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. I mean, you have multiple risks with these US dollars, right? You have the risk of banking failure, which is not related to currency. It's related to just banks freezing up, repo markets not allowing banks to borrow. and lend to each other, and a freeze like we had in 2008. And then you have currency crisis, which is usually governments just selling far too many bonds and printing, buying way too much printed money off of the Fed, and in Europe just printing. So these are two risk profiles that people look at. It's not like, and because and you bring up a great point, this time frame. So when I was in Cyprus, I talked to this old lady, and she was like, oh, well, I had this house, but I'd saved my whole life, and then I sold the house ready to go into retirement home. And all of a sudden I had, for the next 20 years or 15 years or something, she said, I had counted on this money, and Friday it was there, Monday it was gone. The bank had just taken it all, and then they put 100K back in from the insurance. But so these are the risks that older people hold, which is enormous in this time when supply chains are dropping, businesses are failing, businesses have huge credit lines to these banks are counting on these credit lines. They're not, this is something that's not talked about in the mainstream media. How liquid are these banks right now? They're all saying, oh, this isn't another 2008 crisis, it's all good. But as far as I can see, this is an extremely important time to keep an eye on the liquidity of banks and the ability of banks to survive.
Yeah, and the key indicator that I'm looking at there is that the Fed rates are going down to zero, the central bank rates are going down to zero, and yet the cost of borrowing to do a business loan right now is increasing. So banks are obviously trying to take a larger margin there because they need to make up, they need to bring in higher amounts of interest. So, because they're recapitalizing in these times, because they've got to prepare for the fact that people are sat at home right now. The vast majority of people are living month to month. And when their helicopter money comes in, or their paycheck, if they're fortunate enough to be able to work from home, or get, be entitled to some kind of benefits, they're choosing between food or rent, food, rent or mortgage. And people are going to choose, survival. And that's what people are going to choose. So the banks need to have that in their business model, and that's why we're seeing such trends. And then when the government's going to the banks and saying, please be good, we're lowering we've got our interest rates down at the central bank, please put yours down. They're just going to take that additional margin. That's just a reality. Let's switch gears slightly. I still want to focus on the businesses that you guys are operating. So a lot of companies, here on the island, you see a mix of companies that fully rely upon people coming to a shop or a physical location. We've also been spending a lot of time making sure that we're speaking to some of our crypto companies. So we were speaking to blockchain.com. They have an office in London, a huge office. I went to visit it before this became such a big thing. And they were talking about the ginormous overhead that it costs in order to get all these people into one location, and then they're limited to a pool of talent that want to actually visit that location every day. Yet you talk about speaking to companies like Kraken, who have, Kraken are just eating up the crypto world right now. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing. Every time I speak to one of my contacts or one of my friends, I think 1 in 20 people in crypto have now got a job at Kraken. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, but they've managed to really create this global infrastructure, this global pool of talent. At Bank to the Future, we were always, our last office was, I think, 2013 or something like that. And we adjusted to the virtual world. So we didn't see much of an impact. We had geographical diversity of our team. Our team were giving us intelligence all around the world of what was happening in their jurisdiction and things we need to be aware of. And also, at a company level, we were trying to give advice to everyone to take this seriously, stay safe. They're far too important to us. Everyone needs to stay safe. But the adjustment to the virtual business was just completely seamless for us because it's what we've always been doing. Did you see similar things? Did you have, so to finish that thought, blockchain.com are just having the board meetings now. Do we really want to go back to that office, or is that something our team actually want? And maybe, is this the new normal that we're going to see the world working from home? having meetings just as we are publicly here right now. What are you guys seeing, and what adjustments did you need to make in your business to continue business as usual?
Well, from my perspective, we've been not only remote, but we've been 14 out of 20 people have been remote. So for us, shutting down the little office that we have hasn't been that big of a change. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's pretty clear, and especially like when interacting, for us, like all meetings are on Zoom and Hangouts and all of the other tools anyway. But it's kind of interesting just observing like how much the struggle is, not least in the banking world, where there's like trying to book a meeting, but the VPN doesn't work, and so they have to go into the office in order to have the remote meeting. True story. And so on. And it kind of just sort of, I mean, it does show that, I don't know, I think it's just like another form of corporate Darwinism. Some companies are better suited for this environment than others, and it is the more modern ones that are better suited, and it will probably drive forward the trend that we've been seeing already. But at the same time, I don't know, like I like meeting people in person. Like I think for us at Bitrefill, we do our twice per year gatherings where we assemble the whole team, and we've had to cancel both the original one and the fallback one, and then the second fallback one. So we're far overdue for the team gathering now. And I don't know, it is something to know your colleagues, and the discussions that the conversations that you have, and the personal life stuff, and all of that you don't really get when you're assembling everybody on a call. Then the call is super efficient. I think there is also value in the less efficient water cooler type things, and we're a little bit experimenting with how we can achieve that in different ways, with doing like social meetings over remote, and it's surprisingly fun, but it's not fully the same.
Need maybe a virtual cooler that people just randomly pop into.
We've used this tool, I think it's called something like Remy or something like that, where you can have like little rooms and you can hang out in different places and discuss and so on. It's pretty nice, and I think it may actually work. Like it has other benefits. Like if you host an after work, you can invite externals that are in other countries, right? So you have to like start thinking in different ways and so on. I think the VR trend is super interesting as well. That's happening in the Bitcoin world with VR meetups. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, we started to diversify for the last 5 years. We've kept everything in-house because of security. I was really obsessed with security in that form, but as we started building out the infrastructure, and as we had developers coming and going, we started to see that we really didn't need to all be in the same office. And this was already mid 2019. We started, some of our developers started going to Austria and working from there, and we started having other people logging in from other places. And we really, funnily enough, when COVID hit, so we were first of all already sort of getting used to the idea of more of a remote team, and I want that to be the case because we're a global company. And this is the other thing with time zones. You kind of want to be a global company because then you have someone awake when other people are awake. So you can constantly be sort of awake because you've got this distributed team. But once COVID really hit and people started seeing the seriousness and the lockdowns happen, one of the things I was worried about was communication. But funnily enough, we saw in the company that communication got better because everyone was using Slack, for instance, instead of like sometimes talking, oh, what did you say in that meeting? Or I forgot to do that. Instead, everything's written now. So there's a lot more sort of fluidity in the communication that's happening. This is very fascinating to me. And I think you might be right, Simon, is that this whole fiasco will spawn a dawn of more and more people working from home post this weird scenario directed by David Lynch that we're all living through right now. Once we go back to normal, I think things like education will change massively, because we're seeing a huge amounts of, and all I'm getting online is ads for masterclass. I don't know if this is a trend that's happening for everyone, but there's every YouTube video has an ad for masterclass, and there's so many online course things popping up out of nowhere now because there's this huge demand for it. And once
the piano classes on, I don't know if you're getting that one. The piano classes, learn how to, all that stuff. Yeah,
and it's amazing. And I think, of course, there is something really nice, and we're social beings. Social distancing can't go on forever. We're going to eventually go back to being sociable. But at the same time, I think a lot of people will be studying things that they actually really enjoy, becoming very, very good at them because they've got the time and they've got the best people in the world teaching these things. And because you're interested in a certain topic, you're learning a lot more. So I think education will change. I think people how they work will change, but also that companies will see that maybe communication actually gets better.
Yeah. So obviously, two things that weren't factored into this was also, the responsibility in ensuring that the whole team is staying safe, that they're not, that they're not going to be infected and stuff. That was like a huge concern. Building systems and operations to ensure that if anybody does get ill and they need to take the time off, everything is still functioning as usual. So obviously no key dependency on one individual. And everyone, especially in crypto, we saw this with companies like Quadrica, where, whether he passed away or not, but if he holds the private keys, this is a hugely important conversation in crypto around business as usual in an environment where, unfortunately, anyone could not be a part of the team anymore. And obviously mental health of people being in solitude, feeling lonely, being stuck. Some team members were away from their family, others were with their family, and everyone was reacting very differently. And obviously that caused a huge disruption. And if any of our team members were in a situation where they had to deal with some major health personal crisis, then of course that's number one. You have to focus on that. But fortunately, most of our team were precautious, took this seriously. We did have people that think they didn't get positive tests, but they thought they had it. They rode it out, but that was some of these things are it really puts things in perspective of the importance of these human relationships. And I do think that a lot of our human relationships within the organization did deepen because people had more concern and more empathy for each other than they might under different circumstances. So I'm not seeing if you saw some of those trends.
Yeah, I think definitely people are listening to a lot of stories online. I mean, the first thing you turn on your radio and within 5 seconds you hear the word COVID-19. So it's just like constant stream of information about this stuff. And it's something that I think is the side effect of that is people feeling vulnerable and also resonating and having empathy with other people that are going through horrible times, because they're thinking, oh God, that must be horrible, because they've been bombarded with the info of how horrible it is. It's such a strange time to be in, but for our business, we're just lucky that our business is based around securing wealth from catastrophe. And so in our side, it's really kind of a good time. It's a hard time because trying to source gold and and all this stuff is hard. But yeah, but feel kind of lucky that we're in the sector that we're in and not in the restaurant business.
Famida, you got some questions for us?
Well, I do. I've actually got a comment myself, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just hearing about like how things have changed now for working, like people that have had to change their working environment. So I see it. I see two different perspectives. Well, actually, so many. But it's like there are people that have been forced to change their working environment. So like with me, and I guess with Bank to the Future, it's like it was a done deal. We knew that it was going to be a case of working from home. So the environment was set for that. But now people are having to change that. And I just feel like that's a different kind of, it's a whole different mindset change. It's an environment change. And some people actually, like you said, Joshua, it's like, it is nice to actually physically and chemically interact with somebody. And I wonder how that affects people that weren't ready for that type of change of environment or change of mindset. Like, how does that affect the business, and how do you I guess maintain a good, healthy working relationship with each other?
I think a lot of the time, the first thing that happens is you get workers working on the toilet, you get them working in their pajamas, you get them working, and that means you're doing it wrong. If you're sitting on the toilet working, you're doing it wrong. If you're sitting in your pajamas in bed.
Simon's actually in his pajamas right now. Nobody knows it.
Is this the part of the meeting where we ask everybody to stand up and show their pants?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Exactly. No, but there's really great guidelines, because you can accidentally slip into being a workaholic, or you can accidentally slip into doing nothing. And so to find that fine line of saying, right, when I maybe if you're lucky enough to have a room that's an office, that you go in there, you get dressed for work, and you go into the office and you work. And that's a really great way of separating work and private life a little bit. The problem I see is that if you're constantly working, you can have a bit of a burnout. Even though you're just never leaving your home, you're just always on. And people like CEOs and stuff like that, we're used to being always on because it's our baby, it's our thing, and we have to. But a lot of people that are workers, they're going into the space now where they're like always on somehow, because they're always contactable. Slack's always on. It's always going ping, ping, ping.
Yeah.
And that's really hard. So so my advice to companies doing this right now, and I'm sure I'm definitely not the best person to get advice from. There's far better people than me. But my advice is to definitely set up a protocol of how to work. Actively think about how an office at home should be, not just go work from home. It's like, okay, let's have a meeting. Let's think about where and how we structure our days to work effectively and to feel good. Like right now, as of Friday, we've all got Easter coming up, and I've told everyone, please don't do any work Friday, Saturday, Sunday, apart from people that really have to for reasons of continuously being online. But not everyone has to work all the time, and that's really, really one of those things about working from home.
Are we all under the assumption that most crypto companies are based globally? Like, I mean, in the cloud?
Well, as I said, blockchain.com had their office. I've been to a lot of crypto offices. So, a lot of crypto companies do have offices, but, in the case of Kraken, they got 800 people, and probably 16 of them or 20 of them actually come to the San Francisco office. So, we can't make that assumption that crypto businesses are all virtual, because there is also an added element with crypto that you need the physical security of cold storage and various other things that are really important. And, the crypto businesses are more, and I think this segues into a really interesting next topic, which is, as a community, we are more concerned with data protection, privacy, and many of these things that probably got us into the industry in the first place. Obviously, for me, it was the financial side, but many other people in our industry, they were missionaries around it. So what I think is a really interesting next topic is in obviously coming to grips with this health crisis. We have had to give up our personal freedoms on a scale that we are not used to. You know, the world is starting to look more like communism at the moment, and you know, an environment that we're not used to in order to get this under control with lockdowns. And as we all shift to technology, I mean, it's clear to me the trend that more and more of this whole conversation, you know, this data is a US company with a backdoor to the powers that be. We've already seen that Zoom had to make apologies because they were routing things through China, and all sorts of stuff. So it's clear to me that as we go major technology, obviously one of the huge benefits of face-to-face conversations is privacy. So is this also another mega trend for our industry, that in an environment where everything's going on servers, does everything need to go onto blockchain? You know, we might have, you know, is that another part of our industry that's going to come as a result of this?
So again?
Yeah, I'm yeah, I don't know what to add.
Yeah, for me, I definitely see this crawling to, not even a crawl, it's like a sprint towards an Orwellian nightmare that we're heading into. And funnily enough, when I first started prepping in January and telling people, hey, you should calmly maybe just go to the supermarket and get some stuff because, you know, I don't know if supply chains are going to last. I mean, now in hindsight, supply chains have been pretty good. I don't know if they're going to last, but been all right for now. But back then, and they were like, stop causing panic. They don't get really mad at me, really furious. And I was quite shocked at it all. And now these same people are screaming for more and more control over society. You know, I'm seeing people all over the place almost saying, I won't vote this politician in if they're not going to, you know, force some sort of tracking thing on the smartphones. It's like people are really heading towards full-on Black Mirror stuff now. Like, you know, you've got to have this QR code, and if you have a positive scan, or if you have the antibodies, then you get a tag that says you are, you know, antibodied, and you can roam around the streets again. And or if you want to go fly, you have to have the vaccine, which is an extremely experimental vaccine, so we don't know. Maybe it works. Yeah. So there's a whole lot of things that people are demanding now, and it's so strange to see even people in the liberty-loving community that is crypto. I'm seeing people totally changing face and being through the face of fear, starting to demand control mechanisms from centralized control grids to trickle down. And this is something that's really opened my eyes to say, hey, this is why encryption and these peer-to-peer technologies are so important, because eventually we won't have any choice in terms of the mainstream stuff that's given to us. We will have to use the open source free community that's building these mechanisms of communicating without central control. Because you know, I mean, even V for Vendetta is all based around like a pandemic. I think I haven't seen it in a long time, but you know, the massive control grid, because people freeze up when it comes to their family dying or them dying, and they'll demand for anything, including all their liberties, to be taken away from them, and it's scary. Yeah.
Maybe I can take that hat, and not that I 100% carry it what you described, but I think to some extent I've noticed in myself that some of my libertarian views have declined, at least with regards to this particular situation. Like, and I mean, part of this is living in Sweden, which has made a name as one of the more liberal countries in this regard. That suddenly, you know, Sweden is the country where you can't buy alcohol in a normal store, right? You need to go to the government store that's only open certain hours because people can't be trusted with alcohol, right? The same Sweden is now like taking a very like, yeah, you know, you should try not to go out so much, you know, but think about if you're really gonna visit your grandmother, it's probably not a great idea, you know, we would like advise against it, you know, stuff like that. And I think observing what it does, I think in a lot of ways it creates more, strangely enough, I think there's more fear among a part of the society, at least the part that understands that there is danger, and seeing that, because suddenly society very quickly split. Like there is the group that is aware, and they're you know, the people that are following international news and see what happens in other countries and so on. Tech workers very often, not to mention Bitcoiners, right? It's one part of society, and then there's the other part of society. It's like, yeah, you know, it's not to worry about. If it was something to worry about, then the government would have told us, you know. And from my perspective, like part of the social contract with the government in a country like this one is that the government is going to tell you with a broad margin, you know, what is safe to do. Like, you know, if the speeding limit is 100, that means you can probably quite safely drive 120. You might get fined, but it's probably not a danger, right? So you kind of have this attitude that whatever is legal, I can do plus 20% more usually. And you know, and like we can discuss if it's good or not that people trust so blindly the government, and so on. But like, given that, it creates a scenario where a lot of people are not aware of the danger, and given that we are, you know, I mean, look, this is the biggest team building exercise in the history of the world that there will ever be. Like literally, where everybody is a player in a massive game against one common enemy, right? And whenever somebody loses, it actually leads to on average, three other people losing, right? So it's important that people don't lose in this game, and that's why like it becomes important for once. I think like it actually does make sense to, and I don't know if I need you know, the draconian regulations or not, but there needs to be a clear message, and I think that again, like we can discuss if it's good or not. That a lot of people like depend to that extent on the government. I would say that it's not great. Probably you guys also, but it is what it is. And given that it is what it is, like we're not going to, like, everybody has all this cognitive dissonance anyway, right? So like we need to pick our battles of like which parts of people's understanding of the world we're going to be reprogramming and in which order, because otherwise like there's a big risk that people just flip the fuck out. Like like it is, you know, easy to start questioning reality, and is this all a dream, or you know, stuff like that.
But one of the things I've said for a long time in the crypto community, whenever I've given talks, and I've given hundreds of them, is we need to self-regulate in the crypto community. Otherwise, we'll get draconian regulations from governments pretty much crushing the Bitcoin space and allowing, you know, the incumbent banks to basically take over. So by us self-regulating and being good actors and coming up with sensible regulations, like being transparent as an exchange and allowing people to see, allows then the government not to have an excuse to stomp on our freedoms of business.
Sure.
And I think this is the same thing with this COVID outbreak. Is like, if we don't just be sensible, stay at home and try to do as much social distancing as possible, we're going to get the jackboot of some overzealous megalomaniac coming in and government and saying, right, well, we're going to, you know, basically take everything away and tell you exactly what to do. And this is where you don't want to get to. You want to not give governments the excuse, because the governments, anyone that heads towards any sort of government, anyone that wants to be in those corridors of power, have some sort of little weird thing in their head that they want to control people. They feel like, I know how to control your life better than you do. I want to pass laws. And these people are already there, and all they need is a full-on excuse to get more and more taste of that blood. And they will go stronger and stronger with control mechanisms. So yeah, try to not give them an excuse.
I have a great I have a great comment actually, and / question that ties in really good with that, from Gary Fitzsimmons. If the World Bank ends up being the dominant power, we head towards world communism. What about the reduction of globalization in favor of nation states? Can you explain further?
Deep conversation. So deglobalization in favor of nation states. Not sure I fully understand the question. So it might be referring to the fact that the World Bank can gain control. I created a video called The Indian Financial Crisis, where I went through the flow of funds with the World Bank and that $1 billion that they're injecting into India right now and what that means for the country. So maybe they're referring to something about that, where the World Bank can essentially be the central bank for central banks, and
then world communism, basically. Yeah.
Personally, so my comment on that is, I speculate on things that I don't know, and I try and stick to things that I do know. And what I do know is finance, and that's something I've always been a finance geek on. So for me, my kind of way of dealing with these situations is deeply analyzing flow of funds, deeply analyzing money supplies, deeply analyzing central bank alternative finance, and then I get to draw a picture of the world. So an example is when people were analyzing the Brexit situation, I think free trade is really is a great thing, and that was a real benefit of Europe. But what is a horrible thing is having your country under the control and reliance upon the European Central Bank. So people that are in Europe right now, essentially in Britain, they get, because they have their own central bank, they get to just do their QE, not go deep into debt into the World Bank. They get to manage, now they could completely mismanage it, but they get to manage their own currency. If I was Italy right now and I'm having to rely upon the policy of what the European Central Bank is going to do with the euro, that's like a double scary thing.
Yeah.
And that's why, so when I was always on the Brexit argument, I was coming at it from the perspective of free trade is awesome, but control by another central bank, that's pretty bad. So that's why the whole Brexit thing was so weird to me, because they had their own central bank and all the benefits of free trade, and yet that was the one that decided to leave Europe when they had the best of both. So I know that that's a slight deviation, but that's my map of the world in trying to analyze these things, financial flows. What I do think comes from this is, and it's great because this was originally, we were going to, that's what is so interesting about this situation. We start in a conversation about crypto companies, and we end up inevitably moving to such ideological conversations. But what I do think is that this is a time really to question ideological extremes. I really do not believe in the full libertarian free market solution to getting this under control. And I really don't believe in, how far the governments can go in times of full control. And the answer always lies somewhere in the middle. And we tend to, the types of people that I'm finding frustrating to interact with in these times, particularly on social media, are the two camps of, this is a complete hoax, 5G scam trying to take over the whole world, versus, you should go out there and you should protest because it's all a scam, it doesn't exist, versus, the world is over, we need to prepare for the world being over, and sending me into a deep state of, everything is over, so what's the point anyway? The reality is we're somewhere in the middle. We definitely, in my perspective, need governments. There isn't a free solution to this current situation. But after this, there's going to be huge implications on the financial side and the personal freedoms and liberties that come as a result of some of the measures that are going to have to be implemented. And really, we're going to need an alternative financial system in order to counter some of that force and keep the traditional system more honest by giving people choice. And that's what I think the world needs. That's what I think Bitcoin provides. That's what I think exchanges that allow people to interact between gold and Bitcoin are giving a valuable service like Vaultoro, and allowing people to interact with, you know, the normal world of Amazon gift cards and spending, you know, through stable currency using cryptocurrency. So I think it's you know, it's really important that we keep building as an industry. And I've never been more bullish on the importance of our industry and the work that we're all doing as a community to provide these choices in the future.
I have sorry, did you want to say something? I just have a quick Twitter comment. You can go first if you want. Sorry, go for it.
My small comment is just that you know, there was this discussion. Remember when people were saying, "What if the governments of the world decide to collaborate on stomping out Bitcoin?" Right. Well, here there is something that is like everybody agrees it's bad, right? And we're observing the governments of the world trying to stomp it out. Yeah, you know, I think you know, in a lot of ways. The inability to stomp out that things, on the other hand, shows at least that something like Bitcoin, which is not as obviously not as unanimously bad as a murdering virus, you know, it's probably going to be hard for them to organize. Yeah,
that's a really interesting point.
Yeah, so this Twitter question came from Simon's Twitter. It's from Blockchain First, and they ask, let's assume the entire world is running on digital currencies. What's your take if all of the countries block the exchange between digital and cryptocurrencies?
So let's make this the last question. Yeah, we'll make this the last question. So let's take that question. If you've got an opinion on that, I'll chime in as well, and then maybe think about some parting messages you'd like to leave in terms of what you're up to in your business, and we'll take it from there. So who wants to go first?
If I can go, one thing that I think the Swedish state epidemiologist said that was very wise is that he said that just because you make something illegal doesn't mean that it goes away, right? And so we have to remember that a government can make something illegal, right? Making it illegal does not necessarily make it go away, just as you know, drugs and gambling and prostitution and all the other things that are illegal in certain countries but not in others have not gone away. And so what it does is that it drives that particular economy into the some type of black market. And I actually think that I've been reflecting a lot, and this is one of the things that I brought to this call, is that like I actually do think that, especially if we're going to see a recession now, that we're going to see like people are losing their jobs, and people who don't have jobs usually get by doing little gigs and small whatever they can get, right? And so I think that we're going, and as that becomes, you know, the norm, not just you know, something that is done by the poor people of whatever society, the immigrants or whatever discriminated group that you have, and like as that type of behavior actually starts moving up towards the middle class, you know, I think that there will be I think cash will have a comeback for that reason, and I think that in that kind of world there will be a very interesting place for Bitcoin, as well as, you know, digital cash. You know, as if we remember from the white paper and all of that, not to reopen that discussion, but like I actually do think that like if there are bad times coming, and it seems like there are, that like this is an opportunity, I think, for us to show the world, you know, the benefits of of our alternative system. And like, frankly, I even think that, all of the complexity that we were discussing before about the World Bank and globalism and all of that is like, I'm a pretty smart guy, but I don't know. Like, I don't know all those things. It's too complex for one person to understand. And compare that to, the Bitcoin system. What's the most complex thing that we have? Is the halving going to make it spike or not? Like, suddenly, like all of our system seems suddenly quite simple.
Yeah, compared to the world, suddenly
where does
easy, right?
Explaining where Bitcoin comes from is easier than explaining where fiat comes from.
Yeah.
It's really great. Okay, there's these computers and mining and this and that, but where does fiat come from? Nobody fucking knows. And like, I think there is a big opportunity here for us to be to show off basically, and to invite people into this alternative financial system.
Okay, well that will be. I'll make that your closing comment as well, because essentially, Bitrefill trying to push forward the use case of that cryptocurrency can be used as cash, and that's a really interesting debate that maybe we're questioning this whole store of value thing and some of the original utility of Bitcoin as peer-to-peer electronic.
But use the store as value as well. Remember that your cash Bitcoins are going to store value better than your cash dollars, right? So yeah, I mean, I never really saw the dichotomy between those things. I just see it as there's different benefits, and that's it. It all interplays.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the illegal thing has always been a weird question for me, because Bitcoin was born for the internet. The internet is anarchy to a most extent, and it lives in a state of anarchy. It has no rulers, it has no leaders. It is just a ledger, and people are free to change that ledger if they have the permission to. And so what governments can do is make the illegal of on-ramp and off-ramp to their currency illegal. And well, once you're in, and you don't even need that on-ramp if you're working for the digital economy. If you jump online and you say, hey, I'll build your website for some Bitcoin, then you don't need that on-ramp, off-ramp, and no one can stop you. So the whole notion of illegality, making it illegal, is a no-show. And most governments, they say, well, I'd rather have some taxes, so I'll make it legal and allow people to then claim their work, rather than making it illegal. And then the government sees no money. They just, it's all hidden from them. So yeah. And in terms of our business, it's been a really, really interesting time seeing this separation between paper money, paper gold, and physical gold, allocated gold. And I really feel that people are starting to wake up from the fact that there is this difference from the GLD and these unallocated assets to even when you're buying it digitally through like Bar9 or Voltoro. You're buying a physical good allocated in your name as your legal property. It's insured for you. And that's very, very different because it's off of our books. And that's very different to an ETF, which is on the books of the bank. And if the bank fails, they can use that and they can re-speculate it. Even if they don't fail, they can re-apothecate that gold. So I think all these crisis points are waking people up to different options in the economy. And so for our business, it's really kind of interesting watching everything unfold, watching people's aha moments of like, oh, wow, what if the banks do fail and all my savings are in there? What about my parents? And all this sort of thing. So we're seeing property prices starting to decline. There's so many facets to what's happening that it's super fascinating for us in the Bitcoin space. We're obviously all very interested in economic theory, so watching all this breakdown is absolutely fascinating. And where gold and Bitcoin fit in is the sort of the perfect sort of juncture for it all. I've just launched a new TV, a YouTube sort of show as well called the Shigala Report, where just took apart. It's kind of based on John Oliver style, sort of a little bit of comedy, explaining things like the HSBC shaky ground that's there. So check out the Voltoro YouTube channel, and you can check that out. But there's interesting times ahead, and I'd love to see where some of your other portfolio companies, Simon, how they're dealing with this space. I think this is a really interesting show because one thing that does fascinate me is how businesses are dealing with this. It's a really, really interesting topic, and thank you for having me on to discuss it.
Awesome. So I'm going to take a quick answer, which is I'm going to make that the topic of a whole video that I'm going to put on my YouTube channel, Simon Dixon. And I'm going to deal with that very topic of what if all countries in the world decided to make Bitcoin illegal, and what's the likelihood of that happening. So that's a pretty deep subject, and we're coming to the end of the show. So I'm going to take that as a separate subject. So thanks for bringing that up on Twitter, and thank you, Famida, for picking that out. And in terms of Bank to the Future, to us at the moment, the key focus is there's obviously been a slight drop in investments. People are nervous with their money. So we're focusing on products that people would want to invest in during a recession. And that's going to be a key focus. The board have put together lots of ideas and designs, in the team of products that are going to be appropriate for people in a recessive environment. So we're going to be adjusting to that. And obviously, if those end up generating wealth during a recession, we think that they're going to want to diversify again into the equity markets on Bank to the Future. But although we're seeing a drop in investments, the pitch is live on Bank to the Future right now. I can't really talk about it too much. It's already met its minimum funding goals, so congratulations to them. That is still happening, and we've still got 5 other deals that we're putting through. And you'll see also Famida's part of a working group that we put together in order to really improve our investor relations. So Sergey and Josh, you're probably going to hear from our team at some point, so that we can really support you in trying to give updates to investors in a more easy way, because there's a lot of nervous investors out there, and they really want to hear from you, and in a more confidential environment, just from shareholders. So that's all. Trying to make that easy.
I have one or two. We've been talking with investors that have communicated out, the ones that invested outside of Bank, outside of you guys, to and I want to put together a report for everyone on a regular basis. It's just with this whole COVID thing happening, we've just been basically all hands on deck for ages, and it's been really difficult. But I'll definitely think it's important for our investors to know what's going on and where we're at and where their money's at. So yeah, I'll definitely get onto that.
Okay. Awesome. I really enjoyed this. So thank you very much for giving up some of your time in such a busy environment. I think it was a really interesting conversation, both on the business level, the macro level, and the philosophical level. So we look forward to having you again in the future. And just really good time. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Famida. And obviously, all of our investors are in very different situation. Our commitment to everybody is that we will continue businesses to the best of our ability in these troubling times. We appreciate that some of you are in life-threatening situations, your friends, your family. You do not have any headspace to even concern yourself with matters like this. But for those of you that are sat at home bored, thinking about your portfolios and your investments and how you're going to be moving forward, then our job is to continue business as usual. And for those of you that are not in that headspace, when you return to us, we want to make sure that we've looked after everything and been responsible with, because we just recognize this is a truly unique time in human history. We're in this together, and just like Joshua said, the way that businesses react and the way that humans react to this situation is what's going to get us out of this. We're all completely interdependent, and I think it's fascinating to see some of the amazing things that people are doing and that businesses are doing in it to get through this together. So thanks everybody. And that's going to do it for episode 53 of Bank to the Future Live. And we'll see you this time next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye all.
All right.